We are here with Tim Pickens. Tim, what can you tell us about your career in space?
My career in space is,
Well, first, how did you first get interested in space?
well, I got interested in space when I was a kid. I was born in Huntsville, Alabama, and back in 1964. My dad worked on the Arsenal, and he was involved in various pieces of the Apollo program, but he also supported the Redstone rocket. So basically, when they were testing the Apollo engines, that would have an impact on our home because the windows would shake. In particular, a big pane window in the front of the house, and Dad would tell us that they were testing engines. So we thought that's pretty cool. My dad was a person who would engage us in the television in terms of, hey, this is happening, we need to see it. This is a big historic moment, this is Apollo, this is whatever. We knew it was important. My dad was a physics major, and he'd end up getting his physics degree after 6 kids. So, but he's a very hands-on person, and I was very interested in the idea of space exploration. I was interested in anything that made noise, like a lot of kids. Anything that makes noise, boom, makes fire, whatever. So I was very interested. So very early, I look back at some of my family photos and birthday parties, and I was, I guess, 5. I'd see the space theme on the cakes and stuff, and and I don't know when my first moment and interest was, but clearly it was the theme. And I had a real interest in very, very early.
When did you get first get working in the space industry?
Seriously, I probably started. I always played around with the Estes rockets and things like that, but probably seriously, I wanted to build rockets to achieve extreme altitudes, probably late 80s. I wanted to do it as just a personal accomplishment. I love to set goals that are pretty high. I never liked being offered solutions I can't afford. And when I want to take a video camera to a high altitude and see something cool, and it's going to cost me a few $1,000s. I don't like that option when I don't have a few $1,000. So I decided, around 90, I decided to build a big steam rocket, steam powered. So I built that. I learned a whole lot about rocket propulsion, steam tables. I learned a lot about instrumentation. And later I'd be offered a job in that same time frame to be an engineer over at Wiley Laboratories as a test engineer. So I'd get to work with Pratt & Whitney doing vibe testing and some qual testing on the RL-10 engine, various versions of it, and later other engines that were being tested for Thiokol that was there in town. So I got to primarily, the people there at Wiley knew I was a space fanatic. I mean, I was on my lunch, I would be working some new design, something I was going to build. When I get home, I'm building something. So things that work never moved at a pace fast enough where I felt like things were getting done, especially in big companies. So you just observe and you get frustrated. So you always think, someday I'm probably going to do something. Don't know what it is, but something. I'm going to make a difference in this industry if I can. So I did. I worked for a few startup companies later. One of them was a company called Space America, and they had multiple millions of dollars of funding there in Huntsville. We developed some 4,000 pound thrust kerosene liquid oxygen engine. We developed some 12,000 pound thrust kerosene liquid oxygen engines. Now these were regeneratively cooled engines. They actually were made from tubes that we actually formed, and I actually hand brazed a lot of those myself. And we tested it out in a cow pasture and these big engines, and we built a rocket. And we did an attempted flight out in West Texas, not very far from El Paso, on some private land. And I realized through that experience that this is tough. This is tough business. And I realized too that it's cool to have a big dream like a rocket or space exploration. That's all really cool. But the fact is, it takes money, it takes an experienced team, it takes being realistic, and it takes, you don't want to set your bar too high or you never accomplish any of your dreams. So I learned from that. I watched. I was a worker. I was an engineer. And I decided that my company probably wouldn't look like that. Those risks were too high. We went out of business. Often in this business, people put their whole business case around one launch having to work or not. If it doesn't, we all probably go to the house. Funding dries up because we live in a nation where failure is not tolerated that often. It's not fun to be part of any failure. So that kind of got me going. I worked for other companies that would end up building rocket components and engines for other companies that would make parts for Aerojet. We made parts for Pratt & Whitney. We made parts for FICOL. We made parts for a lot of companies, and a lot of them were combustion components that would take very high temperature. These were refractory metal components, rhenium, tungsten, a lot of cool stuff. So I spent a couple of years there. And I would build things like rocket-powered bicycles and hybrid rockets. And I would get hooked up with the National Space Society in the early 90s, and they wanted to put something in space. And they would use a balloon to take it up to high altitude, a rocket. And I proposed we did a hybrid rocket. And when I proposed we would use nitrous oxide and possibly asphalt as a fuel. And that was in '94. And they had about $10,000, and we built a test stand on my father's land out in the country. And we fired over 300 motors out there, or rocket engines. And we did go launch a rocket in '96, and we went to 36 miles. At the time, we were the highest amateur rocket ever flown, and that was in the Guinness Book of World Records in 2000. And then later we would go on to chase the Cat's Prize with the larger rocket. Now, this was all being done with amateur people doing it at night. Amateur meaning they do it for the love of it. So 2 nights a week, we would go to my garage and we would build rockets. The weekends, we would go to my dad's land and we would test rocket engines. That program was called High Altitude, HAL 5, which is High Altitude Launch, was the program we had. And it was pretty cool. It was a lot of cool experiences. It was a lot of hands-on. And later I'd be asked because of all the hybrid experience I think I gained through that and the test experience, I'd meet Burt Rutan in '99, and later I would be asked to lead his propulsion on Spaceship One. And I moved out to Mojave and led the early development of that full time. And then I would come home and start my own company in 2004 called Orion. And Orion was not going to be a launch vehicle company, even though I would love to do that. It was going to be a sell shovels to the miner kind of company. I want to sell components. I want to be a supplier to those who want to go mining for gold. I want to give you a shovel. And I want to support you. I don't want to be competing with you. So, one of my first customers was actually Gary Hudson, and it was had a program called T-Space, and T-Space was kind of cool because it was a conglomeration of companies, small new space companies that were going to go fill a need for COTS, you remember, for NASA, which was cool, space station, resupply, and crew, and all that. I mean, who knows? The fact is, there was a big competition, and then ultimately it would be narrowed down. And today we have Orbital that's going to be doing deliveries, and SpaceX, and of course we've got Dream Chaser as a candidate. And so, anyways, but we were part of that, and we developed rocket engines, so that was cool. I wanted selling those shovels. Robert Bigelow met him at a conference just like this. Here we are at ISPC, 2011. I met Robert Bigelow. And I'm showing Robert my pictures. I said, Robert, we got all these cool rocket engines. I've got a small company. I don't have a lot of overhead. I understand rockets. I really am trying to keep the cost low, overhead low, but I'm also understand what it means to build certified hardware per a NASA standard if we need to do that. I know I've got some of those people working for me who have done that. So that was Orion, 2004. So in 2009, I'll fast forward, we've got about 44 employees, and we got about a third NASA, a third DoD, and a third commercial. And our sales are around we're about 6.4 million in 2009. And I bootstrapped that on my own I had banks, but I really never took investment. I did give away some stock in order to incentivize people like yourself to come on board. If you had some special talent that I really needed, that may be the only thing I could do to dislodge you from your job. I'd say, here's the salary, and you'd say, well, what if I did this? I made you a pillar over here, and you're going to be responsible for this. So I really wanted to create an environment to have people that would be the anchors or the pillars in the business. I didn't want to run at all the details of the business every day. I wanted other people to lose sleep at night too. And then there was talk about the Ares one of the big things we had going was we were going to be Boeing's main supplier for roll control systems for Ares 1. We did go and build all the thruster systems for Bigelow for Sundancer. And we did it per AS 9100, a standard that NASA recognizes and Boeing is a man-rated quality system that meets their quality standards. So Ares looks like it might have, was going south, and I decided, I didn't know that I wanted to ride a storm out for another political cycle of another rocket that Congress may end up, making a decision on whether it was going to be heavy lift, was it going to be, is NASA going to let commercial handle crew? What's it going to look like? So for a company that has equipment and assets and infrastructure to build hardware, excuse me, and you're not really in a position to just do engineering services, you really don't want to be in a cycle where you've been positioning yourself to build lots of hardware, but yet everything is in turmoil. And all the funding, even the commercial guys' funding, has been very tenuous at best. How much it's going to be, whether it's COTS, CV, is it alive, is it dead? We've seen a lot going on. So what I did is I made a decision that's probably good to find a company that would really value what we have. We've built a team of very experienced people that know how to do stuff. They roll up their sleeves. They know how to design, build, and test things that could be part of larger systems. And guess what? Dynetics is a company that bought us, 2009, December. They were looking to expand a space division. And they didn't have that capability. And I think it was important that I sold my company to someone. First of all, it was important that all my employees were able to survive hard times if because of economic turmoil. So I did make a decision to sell it. I sold it to someone, and we ended up having very high retention. So we ended up keeping 38, 40 employees. And they ended up giving us work that we would have never gotten on our own. And it was a win-win. So I tell you this because I don't know that publicly, people wonder why I sold my company if things are going so great. Well, they are, but it also takes a lot of, it takes a lot, once you get that kind of momentum going, and it takes a lot of cash flow to keep things engaged. And at some point you got to make a decision, is the dream of the company more important than these jobs and their livelihood, because I've displaced many of them from all parts of the country to come to Huntsville. And I just made a command decision that, I believe for the better of all that maybe we bow out here and we get hooked in with someone who's much larger than us who needs us. And it would be a win-win.